Welcome to episode 158 of Wealth Talk. My name is Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, and I'm joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again, following actually a day with you over at near Linkfield Racecourse yesterday, where we met our fantastic team and had a bit of a brainstorming and a huddle, as we call it, and some very nice Thai food. And I noticed you were adding extra chilies. You like a little bit of extra heat.
I like it hot.
We're not talking about heat, we're talking about extra light.
We are indeed. Yeah, we love to, bring our members onto the podcast and obviously share in their successes. And a new member who recently joined is Dr. Shelley James, who's the sister of one of our, very, very, wonderful members, Jim James. And Shelley has had some great success in her own, business, which is really, I guess, being a advocate for the benefits of light. And she recently did a TEDx talk. We'll hear all about the success of that. And she was sharing it in our private Facebook community. And we thought we have to get Shelley on and just let everyone know a bit more about this.
Well, we've been talking on and off, Chris, over recent podcasts about, I suppose, things we take for granted. We had Raquel recently talking about heat, and we had Fabio talking about how sometimes you look at a property just through the lens of trying to do the work as opposed to selling before you get to the end. So check out the podcast with them. But with light, I mean, that's probably one of the most taken for granted concepts, isn't it, in the universe? And universally, she was talking about that level of almost a connection that you have to sit down and think about. And, she'll mention something later on, a statistic about how much time we spend in natural light, which I found quite shocking. So I've resolved to do something about that, actually.
Play more golf.
I know. Although it was good to play golf recently, and of course I'm playing more now because the weather's better. But no, that's good. That's good. Yeah, nice little comeback there, Chris, on the golf. But other things. But we'll reveal more about that. So a lot of things, and the title of the podcast, I suppose, looking at wealth in a new light, is meant to get you to look at perspectives and hearing other people's perspectives, what I would call distinctions. And I believe that wealth is a factor that's multiplied and leveraged by the number of distinctions that we can make and apply in our life. And there might not be hundreds of thousands of lessons in every podcast, and light sounds like a curious one, but it's quite a fascinating reveal. And it's not just about the light that affects us as people. I mean, look at in countries where there's less natural light, you actually have higher suicide rates, don't you? Places like Norway and so on, where they have no natural light for long periods of time. But we're not talking about that so much, but we are talking about its impact. So in order to perform at the highest level, whether we're in business, whether we're an employee, whatever we're doing, we need to look at the things that add and contribute to our ability to perform at the highest level. And I think Shelley definitely made me think more about not just the light itself, but the quality, the direction, the type, and how it affects not just us as grown-ups, but children more and more, I suppose. They're on screens all the time, aren't they, really, which is blue light. And Shelley talks about, why we shouldn't have so much blue light as well. So I think a fascinating reveal, Chris. And of course, from a wealth building perspective, you can feel the passion. And then that passion is turning into a wealth building opportunity for her. And there's a sequence to that. And we'll reveal more about that sequence because we see it played out time and time again in the IP pillar, Chris, the intellectual property pillar. So this is more about that, but there's more lessons than just IP pillar here.
Great. So let's head over to our conversation today with Dr. Shelly James and looking at your wealth in a new light. Shelley, welcome to Wealth Talk today. How are you?
I'm really well, and thank you very much for having me.
No, you're very welcome. Really looking forward to our conversation today. And you've recently joined the Wealth Builders community, and we must give a nod to your brother, Jim, who has kindly introduced you. And Jim's doing some fantastic things of his own. I'm sure we'll have Jim to share that one day. But Shelley, your message is a very, very interesting one. And I think one that, we can all learn from, many benefits. And this comes off the back actually of a recent TEDx talk that you did. And I think you've had a bit of success with that, have you?
Yes. It was actually one of the top 3 most watched in the world in May, just 5 days after it was sort of introduced onto the platform. And in fact, Big TED picked up the talk and put it on their platform, and it just sort of went viral in a way. It was amazing, 900 likes. It's just fantastic, and it keeps on growing, which is great.
So what was the title of that talk, Shelley, and tell us about your message that you're so passionate about?
So the title of the talk is "How Can Lighting Designed to Help Keep Astronauts in Peak Condition on the Space Station Help Us to Be Healthier and Happier Here on Earth?" So the core message is simply that lighting that was designed for the ultimate lockdown, and the ultimate jet lag, which is astronauts indoors in that capsule, zooming around the moon 16 times a day. They see different sunrises. And actually the lives that we lead here, where we spend less than an hour a day outside, our body clocks are really struggling. And the technology that was developed to help the astronauts survive that indoor online life is actually now available and affordable, and building up a really solid body of scientific evidence to show how that can help us here. So that was the topic of the talk, and that's, I guess, my message is that light makes a difference and that we can do something about it.
Yeah, and that's why we want to really dive into this topic today, because it's perhaps not a direct related to making money and things like that, but in a way our mindset, our well-being is crucial, right? And if we're not in the right frame of mind, then we're not going to be as productive as we could be. And you've studied this. You're back. Maybe you can explain your background with this, Shelley, as to why you've become so such a passionate advocate of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So my interest, I suppose, begun. I had a high-flying career and I had a head injury. I had to retrain my eye and brain, actually all the senses, to filter and to work correctly together over many, many long years. And I ended up setting up some residencies at Bristol Eye Hospital. I took a PhD, and I started to experiment with light through my practice as a glass artist, and couldn't find anybody to help me to make the installations that I wanted to make. So I trained as an electrician, and then through lockdown found myself with the people around me indoors, not realizing how much a lack of light was contributing to depression, low mood, blurry brain, putting on a bit of weight, all those things that we all experience through lockdown. We know that proper exposure to light and dark can really make a massive difference to that. So sharpness of brain, ability to remember things, all those things are completely mediated by your correct exposure to light. So that's how I set up the first campaign. Because nobody else was traveling either, I was able to speak to the astronauts, the scientists who worked on the space station lighting, and to people all over the world who were specialists in this. And together we created a campaign for teens, which reached 2.5 million kids, and it's growing all the time, which led to conversations with the people who buy lights for schools and for hospitals, and realizing that they have no idea either how this stuff works. So that led to what I'm doing now, which is building bridges between developers, lighting manufacturers, scientists, and end users. So an old people's home, a school, to help them to see how they can use light to be healthier and happier and more sustainable. So it's a kind of a win-win all around. Yeah.
And I mean, I guess really we're focusing on the business pillar, but also the IP pillar, right? And something we don't talk about so often on Wealth Talk podcast, but we have 7 pillars of wealth, and intellectual property is one pillar that absolutely you are building so much really credible IP. I've just been on the internet, doing some research, and you're all over the internet, Shelley. TEDx, third most watched video in May, as you already mentioned. I think, is it 80,000 views you had on that video?
85.
Yeah, and growing by the day. So obviously point everyone to go and watch that. I'll put the link in the show notes. But yeah, let's talk about this, in terms of your own wealth building journey here, Shelley, creating IP and in the form of obviously speaking engagements now, which I know are coming in. You're in the process of writing a book, or is that kind of forthcoming?
It's forthcoming. So first draft of the manuscript is done. Now kind of plowing through it again to see if it makes sense, and sending out review sections to people to kind of sense check it, to my ideal audience to just sense check that. So yeah, the idea is that by October, when I've got some other high profile speaking engagements, I'll be in a position to say, and here's the book, and leveraging some of that to create shorter downloadable PDF so that people can begin to experience value and make that part of the funnel of the journey into working with me. So using the IP in different ways to create relationships really and add value.
Yeah, which I think is brilliant. And just coming back to this, point about following your passion, right? Something that, perhaps was a bit covered, we're all in our daily grind, right? We all kind of get so used to doing the same thing. And then lockdown just was such a massive shift. And it gave you that space and that time to reflect, and obviously others to really help you, understand that this was something that, you perhaps should follow. That's only been about a year and a half ago, right? But I think we're already making more of a difference and potentially making more money now by following this new path, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I can't thank Jim enough really for encouraging me to stand up for this and really go for it. So he was the impetus for the TEDx thing. He's also helped me to negotiate my first sponsorship deals. So every step of the way he's been behind me, because as my little brother, he was worried because I was working as an artist pretty much penniless. I've got a property, which is great, but really not stepping into a more mature relationship with money, which I think many women struggle with, but as we move into later life. So this has been a way for me to pursue my passion and earn more per day now than I have for years. So that's phenomenal. Yeah,
it's really good. And obviously we're looking forward to continue, working with you now to really expand on this. Now, I know you're kind of being booked all over the place, different countries to be industry panel on debates and working with the Society of Light and other, obviously, organizations. So one thing I do want to ask you about, Shelley, is the Luna Project, which was a very successful teen-targeted social media campaign recently. How did that come about? And, what did that involve?
So that was the seed for this, and I suppose proof of concept that there was a demand, and actually a demand that added enough value for people to pay for it. So teens and their parents are kind of quite hard to reach groups for lighting manufacturers. So through lockdown, thanks to Jim actually and my amazing nieces, his daughters, we just were thinking, how can we help them to understand the difference? So we came up with this idea, and I thought, well, maybe, and he actually introduced me to an amazing TV sort of production studio, animation studio, who do some amazing work. And they were sort of very grand, and they agreed to take on the project, but it was going to be £75,000 to kind of just do the concept, and they would own the rights. It was like, so well, should I take out a mortgage on a house? What should I, if I want to do this really, is this what commitment looks like? And actually, thanks again to Jim, we found some free, very low cost DIY video tools. And basically I did it myself and found a focus group of teens who helped me to kind of fine tune the content to make sure it worked for them. So it was completely DIY. And then I spent the money that I had, actually a couple of £1,000s, on using Instagram and Facebook ads to boost that. And because I wasn't selling, I had sponsorship logos at the very end, but we wasn't selling a product. A little bit of money went a very long way in terms of Instagram or social media boosting. So it was an object lesson in how to to make a little bit of advertising money go a long way. And then it gave massive value back to my sponsors, who could see that they had good stories to tell internally about their commitment to the field. And so it ended up, and so they all came, and actually another 3 who actually approached me to be involved with the next, to be sponsors for the next one. So now I'm preparing the next thing next year, and I've got a number of people I know now personally who are actually open to, in fact, they're thinking, so how can we put Shelley in our budgets next year? So I'm in a position now where I've added enough value and proven value, and supported enough of the people that they want to support to begin to create a virtuous circle, because my main message, my main mission is to share this story, but I also need to find a way to make that viable commercially, and I seem to be finding a way to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like those connections are really building now, which obviously is super important. We talked about obviously children there. We've got the WealthBuilders for Families program, which is still in development, but absolutely we're looking to work with you and see how we can bring in some of your lessons into the wealth lessons and combine the two together. So I guess that leads us on to sharing with our listeners, Shelley, some of the things that perhaps affect us, and maybe some small changes that we can all make in our daily activities, our daily lives. Certainly, a lot of our listeners are business owners, they're people in property. So from your experience, what are some things that people should be aware of?
So there are a couple. Light is affecting, it's the most powerful thing. It affects you since you were in the womb. It's an amazing, you can't overstate how important it is. But there are some very simple things that you can do. So there's part of the brain, which is, there's the vision part of the brain, and obviously that's looking for, if you're developing a space, you want it to look sort of calm and balanced and all of those things. But there's another part of the brain, which is the non-visual system, which is right in the very middle of your brain. And it's particularly noticing differences between bright, cool light from above. You think about that's the sky, and that's the wake up signal. It affects your mood, it affects your ability to sleep, it affects your alertness or your attention. So it's better than a cup of coffee. So if you want to create an environment which is bright and refreshing and makes you feel alert, then if you can find light sources which are bright without glare, and which, if you bounce light from the ceiling and from the walls, you can reduce the amount of energy you need to create the same experience of brightness. So the first thing is obviously to get outside, because that's the most sustainable free light that you can get, and it's the best because it's got wavelengths that artificial light doesn't have. It's like the difference between a multivitamin and a salad. It's just a different thing. But we can use artificial light to create that bright, fresh, alert feeling. You can improve productivity, you can improve mood, memory, response times, all those things with that sort of hit of bright coffee for your brain. And then, but you don't, having bright, cool, fresh light is one thing, but we also know that a softer, warmer color temperature, so if you think more like a campfire glow, people tend to perceive even a neutral expression as being more positive. We find lateral thinking, a number of other sort of creative and collaborative mechanisms in the brain kick in a warmer, in a light which makes you look warmer. So that's something else to consider if you're creating an environment for a negotiation or for a more kind of creative, collaborative conversation, or even just to do sort of more quiet thinking yourself. Then that bit, creating lighting which allows you to shift between those scenes, will make a big difference to your ability to perform those different types of tasks. It'll kind of support your brain in those, like different mood music, essentially. Yeah. And then I guess the last thing, which is, so it's like coffee for the brain. If you can allow the brain to wind down, allowing it, I guess, an hour or so, ideally in 2 hours, but at least an hour without blue light, particularly the light coming from your screens, that will allow you to switch off. And then at night, if you can make sure your room is as dark as possible, it will actually allow your brain, you can remember up to 40% more if you get a good night's sleep. So, and your brain is like a little meerkat, it's going, should I be up and about? And so exposure to light at night, even a bedside light or light coming through curtains which aren't good light blocking curtains can stop you from falling into the deep sleep that you need to improve your memory, to improve your muscle tone, to improve your digestion. All kinds of stuff happens while you're asleep.
Yeah. I guess as well as considering, the effect of light on ourselves and our own productivity, certainly for people who are in property, thinking about the light that's in their properties for their tenants to give them a better life as well. And, all these kind of intangible things that actually could end up with tenants having a more enjoyable experience, staying there longer. Any experience with that?
Well, yes. So I've been invited to be on the International Well Advisory Panel for Light. So that's a healthy building standard. And what we know now is that buildings which have achieved that level of well-being sort of built into the space, so that's to do with noise, to do with thermal comfort, but also critically light. If you're able, property developers who are creating spaces which deliver those standards can actually sell those for a premium, because they make that a feature of the property, that it's a healthy building, and they get better quality tenants. They find lower vacancy rates. So there's a real added value, not only in improving the quality of light in your spaces, but also communicating that, because unless you point it out, people may not notice. But if you make that part of your proposition, that it's a space which is for health and well-being and for inclusive life, then you can actually make that part of a feature or a benefit, really.
Yeah. So, we know light is affecting every single cell in our bodies. So important here. Is there anything else, Shelley, that you're working on? Anything to share which you think would be a benefit to our listeners?
I think the first thing to really just is to be aware of light, really, because it's something that we just take so for granted. So I think if you can be aware of light in your own life, so for example, make sure you get outside in the morning, ideally even just listen to a podcast or take meetings outside if you can, then you will, not only will you improve your own health and well-being, but you'll also then in the evening wind down, and at night don't even have your phone in the room, switch it off, take it outside, charge it somewhere else, and then your children and other people around you will see you making those sorts of choices yourself. Because most of us get outside for less than an hour a day, which is actually less than the United Nations minimum for people living in prison. And we know that it not only will it affect you now, but actually the long-term benefits of living without a solid mood enhancing wake up and then sleep cycle. Long term, it seems to contribute to risks of Alzheimer's, all kinds of other long-term chronic diseases. So I guess that's just be light aware, and then also invite your tenants and your clients and your suppliers to be aware of that too, because the return on investment for a relatively small investment in a better quality lighting solution can be massive, not only in terms of your own health and well-being, but also the value of the property that you're involved with. So I guess that's my invitation, is for you to be aware of light. And the other thing perhaps to mention is that our book's coming out in October, so I'll be sharing progress and information about that in due course via the WealthBuilders community.
Yeah, please do share that within our Wealth Builder groups as soon as you have that, Shelley. And just finally, I suppose it's only been early days since you've joined the Academy. What are you looking forward to learning and collaborating with others on over the next 12 months?
It's just wonderful to be among so many people being so sort of honest and constructive about money, because mostly I grew up in an environment where it was very sort of confusing and tricky. So the first thing I'm really loving, and through my coach and the other people that I'm meeting through this group, is simply being in a situation where, like beginning to go to a gym, you go, okay, I can do something about this. So I'm looking forward to growing in confidence, because I felt a bit nervous about jumping into the group. So that's the first thing. And I think also one of my personal goals is to build my property goal to create at least 5 properties which have the lighting to the well standards, so that we can show that there is a real business return for integrating that way of thinking into the built environment. So I'm looking forward to working with others in this network to make that a reality, so that we can show by example of what's possible.
Yeah, we're so excited and pleased to have you with us, Shelley. And thanks so much for sharing everything with our listeners today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Okay, interesting stuff from Shelley. Looking forward to getting into quite a few different lessons there. So before we do that, Kevin, actually, we must remind our listeners that we are holding a Wealth Builders experience tomorrow evening. So if you're tuned into the podcast on the day this comes out, then it's actually Thursday the 30th. We are holding a Portuguese kind of wine tasting and pasticos. So really fun evening for members and non-members to come along. So even if you're not already part of the Wealth Builders community, maybe you've just been listening to the podcast for a few months, you're enjoying it, you'd like to come and say hello, share a glass of something nice with us, then we're going to be holding that in North London, and details can be found in the Wealth Builders Facebook group, but it's at the Tufnell Tavern starting at 7:30 p.m.
Yeah, and hopefully we're doing more of those things. You know, we recently did a golf day, and we've got more of those things to come. And talking about that, you made a joke at the beginning, Chris, about me sort of playing more golf, and I think that's about enjoyment. But definitely, I think the shocking statistic she came out with there was, to do with prisons. Do you remember what she said there? She said that even in prison, there's a stipulation that you should have at least an hour of outdoor natural light, and so few of us doing that these days, particularly with kind of hybrid lifestyles, and all of that changing and the environment changing. Getting out and just enjoying natural light is a key thing. So, I like to do my dog walk, and I'll do one of those later on this morning. But I'll do so conscientiously, not just for the walking, which is important for me. I've got a new regime, Chris. I might share it with you. Just to try and get a little bit more discipline to what I'm doing, and I like a good a kind of mnemonic or acronym. And it's but this one isn't one of those. But it's what I'm doing every week. So WEEK. So number one, I'm resolved to do at least one major. I've got a black lab, and usually the family are walking him. I'm not actively involved in that so much, but I've resolved to do at least one of those every week during the working week, because I do it at weekends. So that's my W, is a walk. So either ideally with the dog or with the family, and then 2 bits of exercise. I've got a home gym, and my wife was commenting how it's one of the only rooms in the house that's not getting used. So exercise, at least 2, and then K is kilograms, just to push a bit of weight and get the strength going. We had a bit of a family get together a week or so ago, Chris, and we were all resolving how one of the tests of getting old is whether you can get up off the floor on your own, without using your arms. Imagining you'd broken your arms, and that's got nothing to do with light, I know, but everything to do with just getting older. So I think all of this helps. And I did find a cunning plan to get up without using my arms, and had nothing to do with being lifted or hoisted, as my daughter said. Yeah. But all good fun. But I mean, that, and joking aside, that I think Shelley's helped me think about that. And of course, well-being is critical, isn't it, in order to perform wealth at the highest level? Yeah. Because so many things to distract us, and the phone being not just obvious for us, but for children. And I think we need to bring that lesson out loud and clear in terms of light when it comes to Wealth Builders for children, and how to make kids appreciate that light, not just screen light and the blue light that she's encouraging us to switch off when we go to bed, and not have the first thing we do is plug our phones in to get charged by the bed and say our prayers, and then get up in the morning on our knees getting the charger out, and the very first thing we do is reach for our phone. So maybe she's got some very valid lessons there that we could take something from, notwithstanding the wealth lessons, Chris, you're now going to pull out.
Well, it's often said, isn't it, health is your greatest wealth, and I think that is absolutely true here. So the two do go together. But yes, we're on Wealth Talk, and we know there's a process for building wealth, and we're really delighted now to have Shelley as part of our Wealth Builders Academy community, so we can work together with Shelley and learn from her with the great things that she is able to help us with, but also share with her the process that we know is tried and tested for building wealth. And I think there were so many parallels from what Shelley talked about. We all say step one is always has to be a catalyst, right? And for Shelley, there was, she had an accident and she had to relearn some things. And it was going through that process that she started to get curious about, the way the brain works and the way that light affects us. So that catalyst was present, and it was very important. But then stage one of our roadmap, our 9-step recurring revenue roadmap, is about building confidence. And that confidence grew as her friends really encouraged her through lockdown to follow her passion, all this knowledge she had, but she wasn't necessarily sharing that. So the stage one there is about building confidence. And only then can you really start to educate and learn about the different assets. And for Shelley, of course, she's kind of fallen into, in some respects, the IP pillar by sharing her message, but now carefully crafting products and speaking engagements and books that can actually generate income streams for her.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, and a couple of things to say just before I talk about that. One is a big debt of gratitude that I know she shared on the podcast to her brother Jim. Jim's just an outstandingly warm, engaging, and sharing individual, and we're so thankful that he's in our program, not just because he's encouraged his sister to take the steps to join us, but how much he helps and supports so many other people in the community, certainly around business. The other thing I'd say is, it's important to feel support because your confidence comes as a reflection of how other people support you. And I think with her brother's support, and then now she's seeing actually there's a process, and she gets the support of the Wealth Builder community and her coach, as she mentioned as well. Then I think that process will be assured for her, because rather than just following the passion and blindly doing so, she'll now know how to monetize that in a way that keeps the mission going, because you need some money to keep the passion going, really. And that's quite a key distinction as well. So some really good things there coming out of that.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to recognize the fears that come as well. Often a fear of failure, especially when you're building your profile, building your personal brand. Many little voices, and sometimes fear of success. What if this actually goes well? How's it going to change my life? And do I want that change? So there's a lot of conflicting feelings that I think can hold a lot of people back. And, it takes courage to push through that.
Well, also it's not just the courage of pushing through, but it's also the courage to recognize that it's not wrong. That one of the byproducts of sharing your passion is you get paid for it. And I think Shelley admitted there to having a slightly uncomfortable relationship with money. And I remember having a conversation with her following Jim's referral, and that was loud and clear to me that there was a level of discomfort with the reward that comes from creating a stronger profile. I mean, I'd encourage everybody to go listen to the TED Talk, hear her story, and I'm sure you can put a link to that in the show notes, Chris. And what did she say it was now? 5,000 more than you guessed.
85,000, yes.
85,000. I mean, that's outstanding. It would just be great to get it to 100,000. So if you can, head over to listen to what Shelley has to say. And it's good that, and I like the fact that she said Big Ted picked it up as well. So a very powerful message. And I think from our perspective, getting known for what you do is a very, very powerful way to then, once you have got that, you're building that profile, that you can create then books and courses and other things. Not least, of course, that she's now saying she's getting paid more than she was ever paid before. So even though that might not be recurring, let's say she's being paid to attend something or to be a judge on something or to be a host on something, then if she's making more money as in terms of an hourly rate, let's say, or a daily rate, then that makes more profit that you can reinvest profit. So it isn't that everything needs to be recurring. It's that if you're making more money because you're doing a better job, you're making better distinctions, then you can make more profit And all too often, business owners where their personality, their identity is linked, don't monetize themselves very well. They can do well financially in terms of an hourly rate, but reinvesting the profits is a key thing. So that will be definitely one of the skills that Shelley will learn, and that will probably reflect itself more in the other pillars. And I think she mentioned property being one of those, and possibly even the pension pillar as well, to get some tax relief and a whole combination of things that people have heard us talk about before.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, alongside the IP pillar, Shelley set a goal to have 5 properties that have their own health and wellbeing element. And just on that, kind of reminds me, recently we interviewed Raquel Carral, and that was all about building wealth through sustainable investing. That was episode 154. And Raquel was talking about some low-cost ways that you can reflect heat back into your properties. And Shelley was talking about the same concept, really, reflecting light back into the property. And, you know, for property investors, of which we know many of our community are, there are these simple kind of, I guess, tactics which can really improve, you know, and increase value. So you can sell the property for more, you can rent it out for more, and your tenants will be happier. So I think there's some real benefits here.
And arguably, there's a cost saving somewhere. You know, the more you're reflecting light, the less it costs you to do it. And if you can use technology and harness the technology to control the volume and the cost of light, you know, we know that costs are going up, particularly those people where the cost of heating, lighting, and doing other things, Chris, is integral to the profit. You know, service accommodation, student accommodation, holiday accommodation, you know, where your HMOs as well, where paying the bill is part of what you do as the owner of the property. So the more you can reflect heat, light, and other things back into the home to make it more sustainable and lower cost, the more profit in the end you'll make as well.
Yeah. So interesting how all of these things just so linked, aren't they? And
you know what, Chris, I was constantly reassured. I was listening to an interview that you know, we've got some copywriters and other people who do interviews, and I was listening to an interview that was done for something that will come out soon. And one of the things I noticed was this particular gentleman who was being interviewed was saying he was drawn to WealthBuilders because of our impartiality and because we're holistic. There's so many things, I think, in the area, the domain of wealth, tend to be myopic. They'll focus on one thing, this one thing, you know, and this one thing is a puzzle piece in the jigsaw. What WealthBuilders does is shows the picture, the whole picture of the jigsaw puzzle, and then helps you understand how each piece works when you're ready to place it, you know, and I think that's really valuable. So I'm proud that we do that. I'm proud we're the only holistic company I know of in the whole of the UK. And if you're remotely interested in getting to know us more, come along on the 30th and say hi. But if not, just, you know, take the trouble to ask somebody else to say, hey, this is a good podcast, you know, have a listen. Or just get in touch and see if, you know, you might want to turn some of this light that we shine on the wealth building process on yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And if you've enjoyed this episode or recent episodes, then just hit the share button on your podcasting app and share it with someone, just one person who you think might enjoy it too and benefit from it. We'd really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And yeah, hopefully we will see some of you tomorrow evening. We'll very much look forward to that. And thanks again for tuning in today. Kevin, we'll be back same time, same place next week.
We will do. And I'll see you later. But until the next time we're on a podcast, my friend, see you.